Thus, it's time now to take a look at stories making headlines on the front page of Nigerian newspapers. And as expected, the protest is dominating papers this morning. So I begin with the blueprint. The major story here says, as protest commences, federal government urges dialogue, reels out achievements, more groups back out. And the riders there, 50 kg rice to be sold at 40,000 naira available. Idris. Governor Yusuf, Emir Sunusi, Kano residents back Tinubu. Court restricts Abuja Ogun protesters. Let no bullet be fired tomorrow. Adegborua begs Inspector General of Police, Tinubu. And another story here. Oil theft, NAF airstrikes destroy over 70 illegal refineries in 3 months. 2026 recapitalization. CBN begins review of banks' capital plans. We will support federal government's $1 trillion GDP 2030 target. Kadoso. Edo Ondo Guba, INEC tasks media on fake news, misinformation. Some stories on the front page of the Blueprint newspaper. To the Daily Independent now. Federal government in last-minute move begs Nigerians to shun protest. Says constructive engagement preferable, more result-oriented. Reels out interventions taking so far to cushion effects of hardship. Senate appeals for more time for Tinubu to address demands. And another story here. Tinubu Mba Sanwo-Olu Mon Onyeka Oweno. A really sad one there. The police deactivate improvised explosive device in Lagos ahead of protest that happened yesterday. There's no need for protest, Sanwo-Olu insists, vows severe punishment for troublemakers. Some stories on the front page of the Daily Independent. And to the Daily Times, why we are worried about protest. Federal government is quoted as saying that begs protest organizers, others to give government more time to put in place reforms aimed at economic revival. Give government more time, Senate urges protesters. Hashtag end bad governance protests, court restricts protesters in Abuja, Ogun, Kwara. And the downstrip here says, contentious scheme of service, ASUP puts proposed strike on hold. And another story at the top corner there, protests respond promptly to Nigerians' demands, Catholic bishops urge Tinubu. Those are some of the stories you find on the front page of the Daily Times. To the New Telegraph now, still talking about protests, the D-Day, Tinubu's democratic credentials under test. As IGP insists no unplanned protests, warns against fake news spread. Court restricts protesters to Abuja Stadium. Federal government advocates dialogue, says economic hardship will abate soon. 1 year too short to assess government's performance. That's what the Senate is saying. Police arrest senior civil rights activist. Lagos won't allow another hashtag EndSARS, Sanwo-Olu warns. Enugu PDP fingers APC Labour Party leaders in plot to cause unrest. And another story here. Currency in circulation posts record high at 4.05 trillion naira. Some stories on the front page of the New Telegraph. To the Punch newspaper. Tension, food prices rise as hunger protest begins today. Presidency, National Assembly, governors beg protesters as Nigerians rush to stock foodstuff. Police seize protest materials in FCT Lagos. CP insists on court order on rally routes. And another story here. God to others held for justice. Ajumogobia daughter's murder. A sad one there. And imported vaccine lingers as cholera cases hit 4,809. All right, some of the stories you find on the front page of the Punch newspaper. To the Leadership newspaper now. Tight security as hunger protest begins today. Governors, federal government make last-minute appeal to protesters. Ex-militants, others pull out. Court restrict protesters to Abuja Stadium. PDP accuses APC, Labour Party, of plot to cause unrest in Enugu. And Kano begins plan to implement minimum wage. Another story at the top corner there, EFCC recovers over 231 billion naira, $70 million in 1 year. Some stories on the front page of the Leadership newspaper. To the Daily Trust newspaper now. As protest begins, government urge restraint. Reduce demonstration to 1 or 3 days, organizers, lawyer. Bandits, insurgents may hijack rallies. That's what the Secretary of the Government to the Federation has said. Bomb scare in Lagos, Abuja residents stockpile food. We won't tolerate violence, governors warn. Provide security for journalists. MRE tells federal government. That's the media rights agenda. Another story here, 3 arrested for overkilling of Justice Ajumagobia's daughter. Sudanese army chief survives deadly drone strike. Some stories there on the front page of the Daily Trust. Olamide.
I begin here with The Guardian. The big story here is still on the protest. Anxiety in state as protesters insist ignore government appeals. Damawa denies receiving 20 trucks of grains from the federal government. Court restricts protesters to 4 centers in Ogun State. Police foil bomb attack in Lagos. Restrict protesters to 2 venues. Tribute for elegant stallion Owenu as bid stops as at 72. And amid a 30 trillion naira probe, NAS amends a CBN's act to raise Ways and Means loans to the federal government. The major story is on the front page of The Guardian. To this, Nigeria court bars protesters from demonstrating in FCT. The writer there says Lagos police vows to enforce court restrictions on chime-in venues, deactivate explosive device, cuts down protest to 1 day. Adegborough urges organizers. Governors intensify call for dialogue. And after emergency session, Senate asks protesters to jettison action. Opposition lawmakers walk out as NAS jerks Ways and Means advances threshold to 10%. Another story here says Algon demands direct payment into 774 accounts of local government areas. Ozekeme's chambers writes state finance commissioners on judgment compliance. NEF airstrikes destroyed over 70 illegal refineries in 3 months. On the downstrip, World Bank restructures $350 million loan to Nigeria to bolster energy infrastructure. And on the top corner, CBN to support $1 trillion economy target for recapitalization, according to Kadusu. The major stories on the front page of this Nigeria to Nigeria News Direct. Court institutes restrictions to time venues to curb potential security threats. Protests can be hijacked by bandits, insurgents, other criminals. The federal government says no true friend of Lagos will protest. That's according to the Lagos state governor. Senate passes bill to increase federal government Ways and Means borrowing limits. And on the downstrip, Makinde renames first technical university after Ajimobi. The major stories on the front page of Nigeria News Direct to the Platform Times. Still on the protest, Police IG threatens showdown over failure to meet conditions. Ogun custodial centers on high alert ahead of planned protests. Opposition reps stage walkout over controversial bill to raise Ways and Means. Another story here says tensions escalate in Southwest as Sunday Igboho issues fresh notice to Fulani headsmen. Senator Adiola alert federal government in a bill for major road rehabilitation project. Federal government incurs 633 billion naira electricity subsidy in the first quarter of 2024. Another story here says 49 inmates graduate from vocational basic education programs in Ogun State. Olowu advocates a return of history in school curriculum, facilitates scholarships, calls for homegrown school feeding initiative revival. The major stories on the front page of the Platform Times to the Nation. Why protest is unnecessary by Akume, Edu, Bagudu, and Alaki. The court limits protesters to Abuja Stadium, 4 places in Ogun State. ID detonated in Lagos. Makinde names Technical University after Jimobi. And a feature story here says Oweno preached love in a last performance. That one there, that's on page 6 of the Nation. National Assembly reenacts 2024 Appropriation Act, passage rowdy House. Another story here says EFCC recovers 231.62 billion naira under President Tinubu. The major stories on the front page of the Nation. To the first news, Adegboruwa makes bold appeals to Tinubu, end economic pain now, reverse damaging policies. To the IGP, let no bullets be fired, ensure safety. To demonstrators, protest with purpose, keep it peaceful. Bomb scare in Lagos ahead of nationwide protests. Protest will not solve our problems. Sanwo-Olu urges Lagosians to choose peace. And the picture there shows the governor addressing Lagosians, urging unity and patience amid planned protests. Federal government hails Bayelsa governor amid the protest. The orders offices markets to open on Thursday. And still on the protest like Lagos, Ogun Court restricts demonstrations to 4 locations. These are the major stories on the front page of the First News. And finally, on the Sporting Live, on the summer transfer, Spurs ambush Osimhen. AIU clears Nigeria's athletes of doping. Okoyori crashes out as West Ham closing on Somerville. Club distances himself from England job. And also Lukaku agrees pay cut to join Napoli. The major stories on the front page of the Sporting Life. Veronica.
All right. I believe that our viewers have been updated. Like we mentioned earlier, the protesters dominating the papers this morning, but then there are other stories that might interest you. So you might want to get any of the papers to get more details. But then, Olamide, let's even quickly talk about the Adegboruwa's demands, asking that the protesters reduce the protest to just 1 day. And then he's also telling the Inspector General of Police that no bullet should be fired as the protesters protest. And then also asking government to look at the policies they have made and look at what they can reverse to address these matters quickly. Recall that the government had even said that this person should come for dialogue, constructive dialogue, so that if they have ideas that the government can adopt, then the government can look at how we can adopt them and begin to implement, which is something that we are seeing Adegboruwa speak to as it is right now. Perhaps he might want to proffer to government how to go about which of these policies and how to go about them, maybe in the coming days. But it's important to also critically look at the police and the protesters' relationship, ensuring that, that no bullet is fired like we have always had this matter of relationship between the police and the people, citizens. And the fact that trust seemingly does not exist between both of them.
And I will say that has really formed the fear of most persons ahead of this protest, especially for most persons that are not even interested in joining the protest. So Adegboruwa's request is a noble one, talking about his request to the federal government to end some of those policies. Let's not forget that the president had earlier mentioned, as at the time he made some of this announcement or some of these changes in his administration, that you know, some of these policies will be like childbirth, and it's not something that we may see the immediate, you know, benefit at the moment. It's something that will benefit Nigeria in the long run. And, you know, so asking the government to reverse some of these damaging policies. Some of these policies are not very immediate. They're not things that you can reverse. They're not even things you can reverse just, you know, just like that without having plans in place. And, you know, it's very important, his request to the IGP, let no bullet be fired. That's very important. Because
absolutely.
To an extent, we will see some of those you know, rules were violated during the last protest. And so it's very important to reiterate that. And I'm hoping that the police officers or those working with the protesters today have been given the proper training.
I think we must also bring a balance to this whole conversation, that the protesters respect the police because they are carrying out their duties, and they must trust the police to do so. So they have to also help the police ensure that no bullet is fired.
And that's where
especially when you stick with where the courts had ruled that only certain areas protesters can be at to carry out this protest. So do not go beyond those places. That is what we would advise. Do not go beyond those places. Stay where you are told to stay as it is, because Lagos State, for instance, was one of the worst hit when we talk about the hashtag EndSARS protest as it is. Look at the number of buses and infrastructure, basically, that was destroyed at that time. Who suffered it the most? We were the ones, you know, that felt the impact the most, especially those of us that use these things. So, and it's still taxpayers' money. We must understand that taxpayers' money are being used to handle these things, carry out these projects. So we must ensure that as much as we are perhaps embittered with some of the decisions of government and we want to voice whichever way we want to do using a protest, we must do it within the confines of the law as it has been stated. So both sides now have to respect each other. The police carrying out its own duty and the people, the protesters, ensuring that they carry out their protests within the ambit of the law. But we need to move forward.